Alright, good morning. This is the week 6 answer key. Thanks for joining me. Alright, so number 1, it's asking me for the domain and range of this function. One thing I could do is I know that this is a square root, so I know that 9 minus x squared can never be negative, so I could say that it has to be greater than 0, and then I could solve. But what I'm going to do instead, because it might be easier for some of you, is I'm actually going to go ahead and graph it. So I've already entered this equation into my y equals. When I look at my graph, I can really easily see the range and the domain. So it looks like my x min is something like -1, -2, -3. So I think x has to be in between -3 and +3. So x has to be somewhere in between -3 and +3. It's hard to see if it's included or not. And then y has to be somewhere in between, it looks like 0 and +3 as well. So I'm going to say y has to be in between 0 and +3. And then to figure out if these points are included, I can take a look at my table. So I can see that x includes -3, and it includes +3, and then it includes 0 and 3. So I know that these are included, which means that my answer is answer choice number 1. Number 2 gives a relationship between test scores and success in college. So I see that there's a positive slope, so I know my correlation has to be positive. I can't say how strong it is based on the linear regression. So I know it's not 0 because it's positive. I know it's not -1 because it's positive. It's not going to be negative. It has to be 2 between 0 and 1. Number 3, it's asking for the inverse relation, so I just am switching x and y. So I know my first point has to be 2, 1. And then my next one will be 3, 2, 4, 3. I'm just flipping these points, so I know that is answer choice number 2. 4. Alright, it's asking for a solution set. So first I need to find my zeros, or my roots, the point where this function here, where this equation is equal to 0. So I know that my two zeros are going to be +1 and -3. So if I were to draw my number line, I know I would have at +1, I would have an open circle because this is just a less than sign. It's not less than or equal to, so that would be at +1, and this would be -3. Now I need to know if I'm going to shade inside or outside, although I can already eliminate answer choices 3 and 4. Okay, so am I going to shade inside or outside? I'm going to want to test a point. So I'm going to pick a point in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and pick the point 0. Whenever possible, I like to pick 0 just because it's really easy to plug in. So I'm going to wind up plugging in 0. So 0 minus 1 times 0 plus 3 would be -1 times 3 equals -3. And -3 is less than 0. This is true. So I'm going to shade inside. So I'm going to shade all of this stuff inside, which means that I've got to do answer choice 1. Okay. Number 5, got to do some scrolling, which is not a component of an observational study. Okay, so observational, I'm looking at it, right? So I'm still going to, researcher decides who makes up the sample. They still do that. Okay, they're still figuring out who they're looking at. They still analyze their data, so it's not number 2. They are still gathering data, okay, but they're not dividing the sample into 2 groups because this is an experiment. So, answer choice 4. Another survey, observation, experiment question. Howard collected some fish eggs from a pond behind his house so he could determine whether sunlight had an effect on how many of the eggs hatched. After he collected the eggs, he divided them into 2 tanks. So he's got 2 different tanks, tank 1 and tank 2. He's dividing, so I'm immediately thinking this is probably an experiment because I've got 2 groups. He put both tanks outside near the pond and he covered one of the tanks with a box. So yeah, he's split it into 2 groups. He's covered one of the tanks, so I know that this is going to be a controlled experiment. Alright, number 7. Alright, it's asking me which graph represents the inequality y plus 6 is greater than or equal to x squared minus x. Alright, so first thing I need to write this in a trinomial form, so I need to move this 6 over to the other side so I can factor it. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. I'll rewrite it over here. Y is going to be greater than or equal to x squared minus x minus 6. Alright, so now let's go ahead and factor this. So my b goes on the bottom, -1. A times c is going to be -6. So I need to find two numbers that add up to -1 multiplied to -6. So I'm going to go with -3 and 2. So I'm going to have x minus 3, x plus 2. So my roots, or my zeros, are going to be, I'll write it here, roots are going to be 3 and -2. So let's see if I can eliminate any of these already. So that's 3 and -2. That's 3 and -2. So I know it's got to be either 1 or 3. Answer choice 2 has roots of -3 and 2, as does answer choice 4. So it can't be 3 or 4. So then let's see what my sign is. So I know here that we have a greater than sign. These are greater than signs, so I'm going to shade above. So that's going to be answer choice number 1. Alright, number 8, I've got to do p of h of -8. So first I'm going to do h of -8. Let's see what that is. So h of -8 is going to be 2. And then p of 2 is equal to 0. Answer choice 1. Alright, number 9 is asking for my correlation coefficient. So to do this one, I'm going to have to go to my calculator. Alright, so I have already entered everything in to speed things up into my stat edit. So you hit stat and then edit. And now I need to do a calculation. I need to do a linear regression, but first, because I'm asking for a correlation coefficient, I have to turn my diagnostics on. So I'm going to hit second and then catalog. I'm going to hit the D key for diagnostics. I'm going to scroll down. I'm turning my diagnostics on, hit enter, done. Now I need to do my linear regression. So I'm going to hit 4 for linear regression, hit enter a few times because my calculator is making me do it. And now I see my R, my correlation coefficient, is -0.63, which is answer choice 3. I'll go back just in case you didn't see it. Okay, -0.63, answer choice 3. Okay, number 10. The following table shows the estimated yearly electricity usage in kilowatt hours, and it's asking which equation is the line of best fit. I see these are all linear equations, so I'm going to do a linear regression. I'm going to pause the video real quick so I can enter all these into my table and not waste any of your time. Alright, so I've now entered everything into my calculator. As you can see in stat edit, I've put the numbers into my table. So I am now going to find the linear regression. So again, I'm going to hit stat and then I'm going to go to calc. Number 4, linear regression. Enter, 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 enter. And this time I want ax plus b, so my a is 0.11, that's going to be my slope, and then my b is -2.69, which rounds to 2.70, so that's answer choice number 2. Okay. Number 11 is asking for the domain of this function, so again I know that anything under a square root, this has to be, under the square root has to be greater than 0, so I'll just write that here, greater than 0. It can be equal to 0, that's fine, but it could be greater than or equal to, I should say, 0. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write it out. So I know that x minus 2 has to be greater than or equal to 0. Alright, so x has to be greater than or equal to 2, if I add 2 to both sides. So if I see these are all in interval notation, so that means that 2 is at the bottom, and it's a bracket because it's greater than or equal to, and it goes all the way up to infinity, parenthesis, because we can never touch infinity. So 11 is answer choice number 3. So I'll write or equal to 0. Okay. So now it's asking which function is not one-to-one. So not one-to-one. So I know that my x can't repeat and my y can't repeat. So I'll write that x can't repeat, y can't. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, this one is a function, and 1, 2, 3, 4, this is one-to-one as well. So 0, 1, 2, 3, it's a function. 0, 1, 2, 3, not 1 to 1. Alright, 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 0, 2, 3, still no repeating. And finally 0, 1, 2, 3, it's a function, but 0, or rather 1, 0, 0. So here I have my 0 is repeating, my y is repeating, so this one is not 1 to 1. Number 13 is asking for my inverse, so I have to switch x and y and solve, so I'm going to say x is equal to 11 plus 3y over y. So now I've got to multiply both sides by y, so I get xy is equal to 11 plus 3y. I have to get all my y's on the same side, so I'm going to subtract 3y from both sides. Xy minus 3y is equal to 11. Now I have to factor out a y. So I'm going to have x minus 3 equals 11. So y equals 11 over x minus 3. Okay, so I can actually see that is in my answer choices. Right there, answer choice 2. Number 14. Alright, so it's asking me to simplify this. So first of all, outside of my parentheses, I see all this is raised to the negative 1, which means that it's just going to turn upside down. So let's rewrite it. So I've got 7 to the negative 1, a to the 4, b to the third. The bottom has become the top, and the top is becoming the bottom. 7 squared, a to the second, b to the fifth. So that's my step 1, and I've gotten rid of this negative 1. I've turned it upside down. Alright, so now I'm just going to change all my negative exponents around. So I know that this is going to be equal a to the fourth is staying, b to the third is staying, but my 7 to the negative 1 is going to the bottom, and it's just going to be 7 to the 1 times 7 squared, a squared b to the fifth. Okay? So now let's go ahead and figure out what 7 to the third power is on my calculator. I'll do it here. So I can do 7 to the third. So now 7 to the third is going to be 343. So I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to draw my fraction. 343 goes on the bottom. Okay, now I've got a to the fourth on top, a squared on the bottom. So the 2, this is going to go away. This is going to become a 2. So this is going to be a squared. And then I've got 3 b's on top, 5 on the bottom. So I'm going to wind up with 2 b's on the bottom. And this is going to be my final answer, which is answer choice number 1. Okay. 15, it's asking me for a solution set to the inequality, so I've got to factor this thing first. The b is 4, goes on the bottom. A times c is going to be negative 5, so what adds up to 4 but multiplies to be negative 5? So it's going to be 5 and negative 1. Alright, so my roots, well, I'll write it out first. So x plus 5, x minus 1, it's going to be less than 0. My roots are going to be negative 5 and 1. So I can immediately cross out this one and negative in this one. So I know that 15 has to be 2 or 4. So now I just need to test a point. And 0 happens to be in the middle, so I'm going to test my point 0. Test point 0. So let's go ahead and do it. So I know that it's going to be 0 plus 5. So I'm going to 5 times negative 1 is going to be less than 0. Negative 5 is less than 0. That's true. So number 15, I know that x is going to have to be in between. It's not going to be an or situation. This is true. So I know that answer choice 4 has to be correct. Alright, 16, it's telling me to factor completely. So first I can see I can factor out a 5 really easily. So that would be 5 times n squared, and then 80 divided by 5 is going to be 16. I can see these are both perfect squares, so I have 5n minus 4, n plus 4, and that's going to be answer choice 4. Alright, I'm going to stop this video, and then we'll pick up on the next one for the last 3 questions of the test.